संविधान के इस विश्लेषण में आपका स्वागत है. Welcome to this explainer. Today we are taking a deep dive into the very foundation of a nation's rulebook. You know, if you really want to understand a country, you got to start right at its foundation. And that's exactly what you're doing today by looking at Article 1 of the Constitution of India. I'm super excited to guide you through this because the history behind this complex document, it actually makes everything crystal clear once you know it.
Okay, so let's look at this iconic phrase. India, that is Bharat, shall be a union of states. Now, how much do you actually know about the history behind this very first sentence of the Constitution? Because trust me, it didn't just magically appear out of thin air. Every single word here was weighed, measured, and passionately argued over.
Breaking down Article 1, Anuchhed 1 का विश्लेषण.
So before we put on our historical detective hats to figure out why the law says what it says, we need to clearly understand what it actually says. Let's start with Clause 1. This single clause establishes two absolutely massive precedents. First, it gives the polity its dual name, and second, it dictates the structural framework of the entire nation. It's basically telling us exactly what kind of entity India is going to be moving forward.
Right, let's see how Clause 2 builds on that. It says, the states and the territories thereof shall be as specified in the first schedule. What's really fascinating here is how this acts as a legal signpost. It doesn't actually list the states right here in the article itself. Instead, it points us straight to the first schedule to see the exact evolving list of states and territories. So it's totally built for adaptation over time.
And then we have Clause 3, which outlines the exact components of the territory. We've got three distinct categories clearly laid out here. Number 1, Rajyon ke Rajya Kshetra, or the territories of the states. Number 2, Pehli Anusuchi mein Nirdisht Sangh Rajya Kshetra, meaning the union territories specified in the first schedule. And finally, number 3, Aise Anya Rajya Kshetra jo arjit kiye jaएं, which refers to such other territories as may be acquired in the future. Honestly, it's a brilliant piece of legal foresight. The Constituent Assembly debates.
संविधान सभा की बहस.
Okay, so now we know what the article actually says. But how did we get there? This is where the story gets really interesting. I want you to transport yourself back to the Constituent Assembly in 1948. The air is thick with anticipation, and the future of a newly independent nation hangs on every single word. As you can see, this one sentence was intensely contested over several crucial days. First, the draft article was heavily debated in mid-November of 1948. Then, almost a whole year later, on September 17, 1949, we see the critical amendment made. And finally, on September 18, 1949, the draft article was officially adopted.
Union versus Federation, Sangh Banam Federation.
So during those dates we just looked at, two major conflicts emerged. The first was all about the structural phrasing of the nation. The immediate question was, why a union of states instead of a federation? Believe it or not, many assembly members were actually pretty confused by the draft at first. They strongly felt that the term federation was way more legally appropriate for the new nation they were building. They basically wanted to know why this standard term was being avoided.
Well, the chairman of the drafting committee stepped in to clarify this. He explained that Union of States was chosen very deliberately to ensure and make absolutely clear that the states did not have the right to secede from India. It signifies a completely indissoluble bond. So you see, it wasn't just a simple choice of words, it was literally a mechanism for national survival.
The Great Name Debate, Mahan Nam Vivad.
With the structure settled, the Assembly ran into its second conflict, which was a deeply passionate, emotional debate over the very identity of the country itself. Check out the striking difference here. The 1948 draft simply read, India shall be a union of states. But the 1950 final version, it inserted, India that is Bharat. And let me tell you, that insertion did not happen by accident.
During these debates, one member stood up and argued quite passionately that the country should just be renamed from India to Bharat. His reasoning was based entirely on the deep historical pedigree that the name Bharat carried. He wanted the Constitution to essentially reflect that ancient heritage.
As you can imagine, this sparked some intense discussion. Another member stepped in and introduced an amendment to simply use both India and Bharat. Ultimately, the drafting committee chairman stepped in again and suggested a unifying compromise. India, that is Bharat, shall be a union of states.
Now, this unifying phrase did win the broad support of the House. But here's a fun, surprising little historical fact for you. One member actually stood up and said they found the phrasing inelegant. Seriously,
But despite that stylistic objection, the amendment held strong and, as we know, was officially adopted on September 18, 1949.
The final territory, Untim Swanolb.
Okay, so we've seen the debates, the compromises, and the exact wording, which leads us to this really crucial point. The Assembly rejected all amendments except for those introduced by the drafting committee chairman. This really illustrates just how carefully curated and strictly unified the final vision for Article 1 had to be. There was absolutely no room for conflicting ideas in the very first article of the Constitution. It had to be a singular, strong, and completely uncompromising foundation.
And that brings us to the end of our explainer, into a final, lingering question I want to leave you with. How does the history of Article 1 shape our understanding of the nation today? अनुच्छेद 1 का इतिहास आज हमारे राष्ट्र की समझ को कैसे आकार देता है? Think about it. When you know that the word union was fought for to prevent division, and that the dual name was this delicate balance of history and modernity, the Constitution kind of stops being just a dusty legal document, doesn't it? It becomes a living, breathing history of a people coming together. Keep this question in mind, and never stop exploring the history behind the rules that govern us.